Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and I thought today would be interesting to do something we haven't done in a while. So, On Writing is a series. We have a number of series that we are doing, and On Writing is one that we sort of offloaded off of In Time. It's I think our brand. We're trying to narrow our scope, and so writing just wasn't as big a priority for us. So I've been planning on doing it on my channel, but I think it's been a rough couple of months, and I thought it would be nice to do something, that a little more laid back but interesting, and that I think people could enjoy. And I think depending on the kind of writing you do, I think there's something for everybody here, and I think we'll have a good time. I certainly enjoy talking on the topic. And I really thought this was going to be a good stream. MathPig just showed up, so I think we're going to shut it down, folks. I appreciate everyone coming. Obviously, the quality of the stream has just, it's unrecoverable at this point. I have gone to his channel a few times, and I enjoy every time I go visit MathPig. But quite frankly, that wasn't an invitation for him to come. Yeah, I don't understand, but no, just giving you a hard time. Welcome, MathPig. Welcome, everybody. So thank you all for coming. So, yeah, story time, I think is probably a good idea. Like I said, we're probably not going to do these as a regular series anymore, but for something, something to break up sort of the depressing state of things in the world. So I will say, I actually was inspired to do this in part because I used to run a workshop, and to quickly sort of hit my bona fides, I try not to get into it too much, but I've been writing for the most part all my life. I've written a number of books, probably, oh my God, I mean, a large number. Many of them just sort of haven't done anything with, but I write far more than I actually attempt to put out there. But the one I'm most proud of is The Water Thief, and it was, excuse me, heralded by a Midwest Book Review as required reading for anyone who questions authority in this country, and by Kirkus Reviews as outstanding, all sorts of very nice things. The critical reviews have been spectacular. Oh yeah, a brilliant rebuttal of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. So. I've been around the block, and I think it's just something I'm going to get back to. I have a couple of books that have been simmering for a while, so when I have some time, I certainly plan on getting back to it. But I did a workshop for a while, and after about 10 years, I sort of passed it on to a friend, and she's been taking it over. And I've been kind of out of contact with the writer community in my area for a while, but I was speaking with her, and she had an issue that got me thinking about an interesting part of writing and literary criticism in general. So she had criticized somebody's work, which is kind of her job at this point, at least in the workshop. I just should try to find positive things. I think people learn. We tend to focus on the negative because it's the easiest to do, but you need to try to find a way to do both. For a number of very important reasons. So, but she had pointed out that there was a character that struck her as being extraordinarily misogynistic to the point where it actually made her uncomfortable. So she said this, and long story short, the person quit the class, felt that was a unjustified attack, a personal attack on him. Now, I had seen someone had once said that the best description of what it's like to be a writer is to stand up in your living room table and around the Thanksgiving dinner with your whole family and just sort of drop trow in front of everybody. And that's actually not all that far off. I think you're very vulnerable when you're writing, at least when you're writing fiction, nonfiction, perhaps less so. But it puts you in a very awkward and vulnerable position, so it's very easy to feel attacked. And what was important was this was her reaction to it. It doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean that this is most people's reaction to it. And if you're trying to get something that everybody's going to like, quit. Just quit, because you're not going to get there. You're absolutely not going to get there. The best example I come up with is Hemingway, who at the height of his success, 60% of the literary community thought he was one of the greatest writers ever. 40% hated him. 40% hated him. And he was never able to crack that. He never got higher than 60%. Now, so what I tell people is, look, if you're expecting to be only as good as Hemingway, keep in mind, at best, 40% of the people who read your stuff are going to hate it. And that's if you're only as good as Hemingway. So writers have this unrealistic expectation that everyone's going to like their work. And I think one of the reasons they have this expectation is because they, in general, show it to just friends and family. And that's kind of a poor idea. It gives you juice, you know, you get the positive feedback and you get people sitting there saying, hey, wow, you know, I love the work. But you're not going to get realistic feedback. 40% are just going to hate it. Sorry. And you can have, I mean, what is it? 50 Shades of Grey. A lot of people hate that. It's a bestseller. I loathe the work, but it's been made into movies. It's been made into, and it sells. So it's very hard to reach any conclusion about what it means when somebody really doesn't like your work, except if you're interested in becoming a writer, which we've talked about that in this series before. What does it mean to be a writer? It's a lot more ambiguous and harder to clarify than one might think. We don't have cards. We don't have some of the best writers I know have never been published, ever. Are they not writers because they haven't been published? Some of the worst writing I've ever seen has been published. 50 Shades of Grey. I don't think she's a writer. Excuse me, she's not. And this isn't just because I dislike the content. I've read swaths of I'm not impressed. So what constitutes a writer is a whole other thing we could go on forever, and we did an entire show on that. But I think, and I'll end up catching on, I'll catch up with the live chat, 'cause I see you guys are chatting this. I'll check in on with you guys in a second. But the point is this: there's always going to be people who don't like it. And the question is it a problem? Is it something you have to do something about? If the bar is, and one of the first people I ever criticized, actually I was in a contest, and I had read someone's work, and I thought it was atrocious. And somebody else had actually posted a comment with all the same objections I had. They eventually removed that comment. I don't know why. I decided, since this was a contest, I wasn't going to say anything negative about one of my fellow competitors, so I stayed out of it. But at one point, my work was up, and I asked her if she was going to review it. She's like, well, you didn't review mine, so... Well, actually, I did. I just didn't publish the review. Well, why didn't you? And stupidly, I thought she could handle the criticism. I said, well, these were my objections. And she flipped out. She went crazy. Said, well, you're just trying to sabotage the work of another creator. No, because I didn't publish it. Like, so it's just my view. And she goes, well, you're just being an asshole. Why? I didn't tell you until you asked. You didn't have to ask. And it's, again, we have unrealistic expectations of ourselves and unrealistic, this romantic idea of what writing is. So all this to say, and I'll actually use one other interesting one. One of the first stories that I had critiqued where I encountered this problem, there was a woman who ended up getting sexually assaulted and or actually really raped by a father-in-law. She accuses the father-in-law. She goes for the judge. Judge wants to discuss it with her in private so that he can sort of suss out whether or not she's credible. And then he rapes her. And then she gets raped again. Now, she ends up being the antagonist in the story. And the author was trying to establish why she's this horrible human being is because of this history of rape. And I remember talking about it and being asked what I thought, and I said, I find this completely unrealistic. And I found myself descended upon by a great many, in particular women, who said, what do you mean unrealistic? You don't think a woman can be raped 3 times? No. not what I said. But again, this obviously becomes personal very quickly. Now I'm a guy, and maybe that wasn't her target audience. I don't think so. But if it's not, then who cares what my opinion is? And it wasn't intended to be an attack. It was a reporting of what I felt when reading it. The idea that a judge would rape someone in their chambers, I suppose that's probably happened. But then you have these, she gets raped 3 times, and I was explained to me that, people who are victims, abusers can pick up on them, and I'm aware. But all of this also, by the way, happened in all of it, in less than 2 paragraphs, less than half a page to describe all of it. I'm sorry, I'm not sold. If you're going to try to sell me on the fact that something like this happened, I'd need some more description. Now, she didn't want to because this book wasn't about her. She was the antagonist. And she was important, and her backstory was important, but she didn't want to dedicate the kind of time to write that. Well, now you got a problem because and what ended up happening was the leader of the group, who was female and had published a great many books, said, "Yeah, I agree with Nick." She goes, "Yeah, I believe that this could happen, but you didn't sell me on the fact it did. You sold me on the fact, I mean, I was seeing the mirrors. You're not supposed to see the mirrors. You're supposed to see the tricks. I was seeing the mirrors. It looked to me like you were just burning through this as quickly as possible so you could write the stuff you wanted to talk about." A reader doesn't want to be led along. Your job is to lead the reader where you want them to go and make them think it was their idea. That's the job of a writer, at least that's actually the job, at least in fiction. In nonfiction, it ends up being the job more times than you'd think, because usually there's still an agenda in nonfiction. And so, you try to do it within the framework and confines of nonfiction, but even journalists tend to have an agenda of some kind. We hope that they're unbiased, and they try to be unbiased, but it's not going to really happen. And sometimes the agenda is, by the way, to be balanced, to be completely balanced. That's not a great agenda in all cases. If somebody comes up and says the Holocaust never happened, I don't think there should be a balanced view opposing that. I don't. And it's not because, I mean, there is too obviously the harm in doing so, but aside from that, the jury is not out on that anymore. It happened. The burden on people saying it didn't happen is so overwhelming, it's almost flat earth level. And you're not required to give flat earthers an equal share of the time to everyone else. So, yeah, even as a fiction writer or nonfiction writer, you're going to have an agenda, and you're going to have your view on what's important in regards to what happened. You can't report an entire, if you were sitting in at the inauguration, you're going to have to figure out how you're going to write about that. And your agenda is going to come into play. And there's no real way around it. That's not to say you shouldn't keep it in check as best you can, but you're going to have an agenda. So all this to say, in terms of criticism, if you're criticized as a writer, oh, it hurts. It hurts. And I've been doing this for a long time. It still hurts. I pretend it doesn't because I've been through it enough. I reached the point where I sit there. I should be able to say it's like somebody criticized me, and I feel a sting. It's not nearly what it used to be, of course, but I feel a sting still, especially if it's someone I care about. And they're like, "Oh, I didn't hurt your feelings." I was like, "No, dude. You know how many people have shit on my work?" Which is completely true, by the way. I mean, it's just, no, it didn't hurt. Yeah, it hurt. It's usually not much, but it did. And the reason it did is because this is an art form, and you love it. You love your work with your children. That was I don't know whether that was Kipling or what's his name, but your work is your children, so you're going to feel it. But if you're serious about it, you have to listen to what other people have to say. You don't have to agree with it, but it's worth noting. And don't try to satisfy everyone, because you're going to fail, and that's how you make a colossal waste of time. But writing is about decisions. You have to make decisions. You have to balance things. That's your real job. It's a huge balancing act. Oh, I want to give my antagonist more time. Okay, fine, but it's going to cost me something. I don't have time. I can't do everything. So, well, I want to have a huge backstory on this person. Okay, fine, but I'm going to lose audience who get bored with it. unless I really know what I'm doing. But if I really knew what I was doing, I'd probably stay away from doing something like that. So there's everything has a cost. And when you change a word to placate a certain audience, you're going to alienate another audience. So in general, try to figure out what works best for you and helps you tell the story you want to tell, whatever it is. And then when someone tells you, wow, I got really triggered and this work is the most misogynistic thing I've ever seen, sit there and say, okay, how credible is it that this is going to be how a lot of people feel? Or is it just this one person who's triggered for reasons I don't understand and can't control? And realize that there's going to be people like that no matter what you do. So you get criticism from a wide variety of people, hopefully people you trust. You realize that some of it's going to be just unhinged, and some of it is going to be much closer than you'd like it to be to coming up with some salient objections to your work. So at any rate, what I'm going to do now is actually talk to live chat. But I guess just because I had that conversation today, I thought that would be a thing worthwhile to just starting with. We did start on time, which is it's I know, seems like it's not me. This is writer Nick. So there's let's see. I'm collecting a list of Nicks. There's a friend Nick, business Nick, writer Nick, transgender Nick. Oh no, it wasn't. It was cross-dressing Nick. But at any rate. So this is writer Nick, and he always starts on time. So 50 Shades of Grey was just. I get triggered when people talk about 50 Shades of Grey. It's a great example of one of the things about the publishing industry, which is your first book is more luck than anything else. Getting your first book published is luck. Tom Clancy, I think it was 7 years he was trying to publish Hunt for Red October before that got taken. And I mean, that was a good book. It wasn't necessarily the greatest writing, but it was decent, and it was a good book. What's his name? Stephen King gave up because so many people reject. J.K. Rowling was told by so many people that her work was just shit. One of the things is the industry moves rapidly, and that's not actually for any good reason. 4 out of 5 books published fail. 4 out of 5 fail to make back the money that they was put into them. By the way, that's interestingly enough, that's roughly the same number of movies that fail. But and so I'm wondering if there's something to that. I just find that interesting that it's about the same in those entertainment platforms. Curious, like video games, is it roughly the same? But the movie studios are banking on the blockbusters. They're banking on the ones that hit it out of the park for them, and that's what's going to carry them through the 4 failures. And with books, it's roughly the same thing. Now, getting your book published, I knew a guy. I've told this story before, so I won't linger on it more than I need to. But I knew a guy who had done a book about a psychic detective dealing with. It wasn't just that it was psychic per se. He was attuned to angels and demons and all this other stuff. So he's a detective, and he can sense angels and demons, and he can sense who committed a crime because of yada yada yada. That book languished for 11 years, I think. Nobody was interested. Then Dan Brown published The Da Vinci Code, and the entire industry just poof turned and went to every agent on the planet who had ever done a book that had to do with religious detectives and said, "Do you have anything for me?" Like, "Oh yeah, sure." And these books that had languished on the shelves, the agents had forgotten about. All of a sudden, they're going through their backlog of stuff because, and that's unfortunately, it's the short-mindedness, but that's how the industry thinks. It changes sometimes week to week what they emphasize. So, anyways, his book sold. That was luck. That had nothing to do with skill. That was luck. Skill comes after your first one sells. If you get a second one, usually that's based on skill. His wasn't all that great, so he ended up, nobody wanted a second one from him after that. So the first one is luck, second one is skill. So, 50 Shades started out as Twilight fan fiction, and it was what's his name? Belle is her name, Belle, and whoever the vampire is, and she adapted it for that. And it's I every now and then, if I feel like I'm feeling rather masochistic, I will go to the if I'm in the bookstore, which I haven't been in a while for obvious reasons. I will, I'll see it and I'll flip through it and try to find something redeeming in the quality of the writing. And I've so far never really been able to do that. So it's one of those books that, as a writer, triggers me because it's just like, oh God, there's so many people I know who are just so spectacular and have gotten nowhere. And here's this woman who really wasn't particularly good. Now, she gave people what they wanted to some extent. I'm I'm a capitalist, so it is what it is. But in terms of writing and the craft, you always get a little disappointed when people who really know what they're doing work hard, languish in anonymity, and people who write that, really kind of luck out and strike it big. And I think there was more luck than anything else. So what I'm going to do is, if you will hold 1 second, I will be back in 1 second. All right, and oh my God, I unmuted correctly. That's a shock. All right, so let's see. Oh Jesus, as a solipsist, I was already here. It really, really, really. We're starting with the solipsist jokes. We're discussing writing, and Porpoise, of all people, comes in with solipsist jokes, which, although actually we had it recommended that possibly we could have Porpoise on to discuss journalism, because I'm not a huge fan of the term citizen journalist. And having said that, we rely on people for in time. We get from other people bringing us that bringing us live streams and what's happening in real life, and we can get it before major network news because we do that. But is that really citizen journalism? What is citizen journalism? That's a show. But Jake 4D, $5. Thank you very much, Jake. We really appreciate it. A wizard is never late or early. He arrives precisely when he means to, and that's Tolkien. There's a lot of interesting things about how Tolkien writes. One of the things is he wrote the entire Elvish language. He invented the language, and you can tell that the language exists because there is a verisimilitude to it that shows that there is depth beyond what he puts on the page. Our normal instinct is to just invent the words you need to invent as you need to invent them. But whether you mean to or not, the way you write is going to give away subtle hints that that's what you've done. You can't control it. It's just you're going to do that, and how well people can pick up on those hints depends on how practiced a reader they are, and how much they're sort of enjoying the work. But you can tell with the fluidity of how Tolkien writes that he invented the entire Elvish language. The entire language is there. And he probably included a lot more of it, but ended up cutting it out. So we talk about making good characters. And one of the things that I say is do a character sketch and invent the entire history for your character. Even if you're only going to use 10% of what you've written, the fact that you know the rest will seep through into the writing. The fact that the rest exists as an actualized person in your head, you can't help but let that seep through, and people will pick up on it. It's the flavoring. It's just a little. It's this nuance that makes the difference between something that's a good piece and a spectacular piece. But there's a law of declining returns. You do a character sketch for all these characters, it can take a lot of time, and you're just doing it for the nuance. But that's usually the difference between, again, an exceptional writer and just a pretty decent one, is spending the kind of time on that nuance. But thank you, Jake, very much. Yeah, that was yeah. Tolkien's work is I think definitely a high bar for a great many. So is a Dune, if for no other reason than you want to learn how to convey an extraordinarily rich world without doing the so-called info dump. You just dump. Every starting science fiction writer I've ever seen spends, when they're first starting out, they spend the first 5 pages. Let me describe this world to you. Let me describe the rules. Let me describe how, excuse me, space travel works, all these other things, so that you know that when we start, so you have that foundation. And that's how I did it when I first started. And it's a phenomenally poor way of doing it, because that bores everybody. They don't want that framework to start with. You want them to have it so that they can enjoy the story more, but the reality is they don't want it. So you have to find a way to inline it and not do what are called info dumps. Herbert did this spectacularly well. The Dune series is this huge, rich world, but he doesn't give you any information until you need it. He doesn't tell you how space travel works until you need to know. And the book starts with the most human of all things you can imagine. Young boy is moving to a new home. He's scared, doesn't know what it's going to be like, and that's it. That's how it starts. It starts without the science fiction. It starts without this huge world building. It starts on one of those things that most of us have experienced at some point. I'm going to be moving, and I'm moving to a brand new place, and I don't know what to expect. I don't know who I'm going to have for friends. I don't know. That's it. That's what Atreides is going through in the very beginning. Now it gets complicated quickly. It ain't just that simple. Where he's moving, they want to kill him. But it starts at sort of something that all of us can connect with, and that's one of the reasons it's successful. You're going to have to, when you write, you're going to have to find a way to connect with your readers, and this is whether fiction or nonfiction. You're going to have to find a way to connect with your readers. If it's nonfiction, you have some idea of how to do it. If you're a journalist working for, New York Times or whatever, you know what your audience is looking for. If you start doing a baking recipe, that might be nonfiction, but you're not going to connect with your audience, and that's not your audience. So you know what they're looking for, you know what they want to see. And this gets back also to biases a little bit. This is where some biases start to come in, because the New York Times does have a bias. It's certainly not Fox News, but it does have a bias, and they know what their readers want. And integrity is absolutely one of those things. But so is a little leaning to the left. And if they stopped leaning to the left, had just as much integrity, but went to the right, they'd lose a lot of their audience. So it's an interesting problem. Anyways, let me get back into citizen journalism is just amateur. Well, that's sort of the way I view it. But there's just, I don't know. It seems like it's an attempt to elevate sort of people who stream these things live to a level. I'm trying to think of another example of this sort of elevation by use of language, but I don't know. So we'll discuss it. We were talking about maybe doing a show on citizen journalism or just, but we'll have to. We'll think about it. Your name got tossed in. So, anyways, what was I going to say? So I and what I'm doing right now is I'm hitting, because we haven't had any specific questions, but usually if somebody asks for a question on drafting, on character sketches, we can spend an entire show on that. We have, in fact, but right now, like I said, it started in part because of criticism that someone really handled, I thought, rather poorly. And I get why. I've been there. And writing is you feel exposed when people are writing or reading your work for the first time. And you realize just how badly you want them to like it. But it's unrealistic to expect the numbers that people expect. And when they first encounter someone who doesn't like it or has some objection of some kind, it's always a shock to a number of people. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to learn to get over if you're going to write well. And the reason is because you have to have feedback. You cannot learn to write well without getting constructive feedback from people who know what the hell they're doing. You can't. You just can't. Reading is important. Yep. There are people who say, "Oh, I don't read." Well, you're going to have a hard time becoming a good writer because you don't sample how other people have done it. You don't have a good selection of tools. You're going to borrow from other people that you've read. So, you know, the techniques, different people have different techniques. They do it in different ways. You need to read, but you also need to have your work criticized by others. And yeah, I don't know. That's just one of those. As someone who's been doing that for a very long time, I still see the reactions and the people who take it personally and who sit there and say, "Well, you know, you're attacking me." No, tell you how the work made me feel. And if you don't want the work to make me feel that way, you may need to figure out what you've done wrong. But that's it. So let's see. What time of draft do I prefer? Bud, Miller, Corona. I can't drink alcohol. So when I did drink, it was let's see. When I did drink, it was the oh wow, I have a bottle right over there, and I can't even remember what it was. It was Suntory. Suntory whiskey was my drink. So role of journalism is to serve as a watchdog for. I do think that's interesting. We'll have to get into that discussion. Porpoise could bury me with what journalism is, so I'm not gonna pretend to. I'm gonna not pretend to know more or question her. I say as I'm about to question her. I think yes, I think that's their role. I think there's nuance to that. I think I'm not sure that the journalists. I think the journalists who do that effectively aren't the ones who see that as their role per se. At least that doesn't come across in their writing. The ones who sit there and say, "Oh my, you need to know this," but the ones who can just sit there and very cleanly report what they saw and witnessed and let people draw their own conclusions. But again, this is I most compare writing to two things: music, because they have a lot in common, and magic, because they have a lot in common. But one of the important things with magic is you're constantly managing the perception of your audience. So you want to make sure your audience is looking wherever you want them looking while you're doing so. You're doing one thing in one hand, and you have them looking at the other hand, and you know that they know that that's your job. So they're kind of looking for it. Now, if they're not experts, you can still manage them well, but it takes practice and it takes a lot of skill. And in the end, you don't want them to you don't want it to be obvious that that's what you're doing. Now, you can get everybody to look somewhere else for a split second by just causing an explosion on the other side of this poof explosion. Oh, hey, look, a dove. You know, it's just, you all looked over there, dove. And people aren't going to be particularly impressed because it was obvious that you had distracted them so that you could do the trick. Well, so what that really means is the magician has to get you to look where they want, anytime they want, and make you think it was your idea. That's what a magician has to do. And writers do the same thing. The stories we like the most are the ones that we figure out as we go along, and we are exploring, and we don't have everything explained to us. We figure it out for ourselves. But that's the interesting thing, because a good writer then knows that and has to figure out how much do they explain and how much do you let them, the other people, sort of figure it out for themselves. And that's a tough one. And again, that's just experience. That's skill. But I think I think one of the things, and I find that, so when it comes to journalism, they don't want to have to figure anything out to some extent. They just want the facts. And, well, they want the facts. They'll figure it out past that. But you can show them the facts that you want to show them. This is one of the things that Fox News does, is, you know, they show a very specific set of facts so that people can reach certain conclusions. And anybody in any news organization certainly is going to have to pick and choose those facts. And that's where you have a lot of power, whether you want to or not. So the fiction writer, you have to decide how much you're going to spoon feed to your audience. And starting writers spoon feed everything. And this gets back into show, don't tell. You know, you can tell your audience that somebody is poor. You can tell your audience that you have a character that's poor and that's disheveled and is homeless, in fact. You could say he was homeless. Or you could, and that's telling. Or you could show he's homeless by, you know, describing just his daily routine. You know, he goes up, he gets his shopping cart, and He's stopped even checking to make sure people haven't stolen anything. He knows he's got nothing in there that's worth stealing. But there's some twine that keeps getting stuck on the thing, so he spends 5 minutes, undoing the twine off. And you are now showing that same thing. You haven't said he's homeless, but everybody's figured that out. So that's also an example of show don't tell, which is something that people don't necessarily uh, uh, understand. People are always asking for examples. There's one example. I've had some better ones. None of them are really coming to mind yet, but it does take a bit longer. And for people who want information here and now, well, gee, you'd say, well, isn't that boring because you're taking all this extra time? Well, not really, because if they feel like they are exploring this character and they're learning it for themselves, then it works. But that again takes skill. And again, that's why when having that same woman raped 3 times, one of them by a judge in 2 paragraphs, made it very difficult to empathize with this character, because she's like, I'm just telling you what happened to this character so that you understand why she's so twisted and evil. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, when you tell me that, I'm very aware. I've just been told that. I don't feel it. I don't own it. I don't, when I look at this character, I feel like I've been told what to think of this character for explicit reasons. That's what a writer does. They tell you what to think of the character for very explicit reasons. But that shouldn't be obvious. And the second it's obvious, they're seeing they're seeing the mirrors and not the tricks. You're supposed to see the tricks. You're supposed to see the guy who suddenly vanishes. You're not supposed to see the mirrors that he's hiding behind. If you saw those, it's over. So that's one of those that writers, I think, have a very hard time with, realizing that I haven't met very many members of the audience who will tell me, or who won't say to me, oh, we just want it explained to us. But then you explain it to them, and it turns out they don't really like it that way. We're not always we're not necessarily the best judges of what it is that we really want or are interested in. You want to get somebody to stop playing a video game that they love, give them the cheat codes for it. And they'll sit there and say, oh, that's awesome. I can finally get this super weapon. I can do all this other stuff. They'll play for 5 or 10 more minutes, and they're done. They're done. Oh, wait a minute. They said they wanted the codes. As soon as they got the codes, they quit. That's what happens over and over and over again. Yeah, it's because we're not necessarily the best judges of what it is we really want. We think we know what we want. In my experience, it's one of the things about life. Life is more about learning what you don't want. We can be pretty clear about what we don't want, and that's just a series of life experiences. You figure out what you don't want in a friend and a lover and a spouse and all these other things by having plenty that you thought were what you wanted, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. But anyways, it's been my experience. We operate much more in the negative that way. So let's see. It looks like everyone's talking beer, of course, because great, I can't have any. You're gonna. So let's see. So, well, we've gone from solipsism to... okay, somebody's going to have to tell me what a solipsist beer would be called. Someone's going to have to... So, get one of our creative writers on that. So, let's see. I think it's very tough to take criticism of your work. These are your children. And it's also what makes it so hard to do well, because you always want to include all the stuff that you enjoy, even when sometimes it's stuff that the audience wouldn't enjoy, or is inappropriate. I wrote a piece on depression once, and I give this example a lot. I wrote a piece on depression. This was nonfiction, of course, and it was a short piece. I think it's actually still available online in various forums. I don't know, but it was on depression, and I talk about how when the depression builds, you start to get contempt for all living things, basically, and you'll be in the parking lot of a store, a market, and a cart will run off and bam, hit somebody's car, and the guy will come out and go, "Oh my God, it hit my car! I can't believe it! Why? Who doesn't secure these things? And why is And they start getting upset, and you're thinking of the one child who dies every 7 seconds in Africa from starvation. and you look at this guy with utter contempt because you sit there and say, okay, how many like is it? I want to say it's actually 2 million. That seems high, but 2 million children starve to death on the planet every day. That does seem. No, I think that's. I don't know. At some point, I used to have these numbers off the top of my head, but whatever the number is, it's a pretty high number, and sometimes they die with their parents holding them and trying to keep them alive. And here's this guy who is flipping out over the shopping cart that hit his car, and then the next line was this. So you have nothing but contempt for these people because as you're thinking about the starving children in Africa, he's wondering why bad dings happen to good people. Why bad dings happen to good people. His car having just been hit by the shopping cart. That was good. I'm sorry. If you, I know I know I just lost some of you. Some of you are just sitting there going, Nick, that's not funny. That's hilarious. I'm sorry. That's hilarious. I wasn't trying to even set it up. When I'm trying to set it up, it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. Don't back away from me on this one. Why bad dings happen to good people. But that was a joke that doesn't fit there. And I like the pun. I liked how it was set up. It was a beautiful line in a setup of a piece that also could have used a breaking of the tension, but not in the middle of that paragraph. Not in the middle of that paragraph. So it's Faulkner who I think said, "Kill your darlings." I loved that line. I was proud of it. I was just like, I'd come up with something funny on my own. And I was just like, it has to be cut. And it was cut from the final version because the humor was in the wrong spot. And it broke the attention of a very poignant moment trying to understand, what I'm talking about when somebody's suffering depression, what they're feeling. That's too clever. I was outwitting myself there. I was getting too clever for my own good. And the only reason to keep the line would just be, hey, see how clever I am. Of course I wanted to keep the line. Didn't fit. And so you find that a lot of writing is trying to get rid of what you would like to keep in favor of what your experience tells you is going to make for a better story or just a better piece or whatever it is that you're trying to do. So, and people are taking the solipsist beer to heart. I'm gonna sit there and so let's see. I do think Twitter's a cesspool, and I don't know. I'm still sort of flirting with Twitter, and every now and then I go on to say things, and sometimes it's ruminations that I'm making at 4 a.m. in the morning. Sometimes it's and I'm just flirting with why am I even on Twitter? And I'm not sure. I started my Twitter account to be a voice for the Codex, and people really liked it. And I got a lot of subs fast doing that. I stopped doing it and didn't get subs nearly as fast. But I don't know. For me, it was sort of a business thing to sort of reach out to people. But truth be told, Facebook would probably be better for that. I don't know. Twitter is one of the problems is, and it's funny because you can get this into writing. Okay, so two things. One, when I write on Twitter, I do huge reams. I'll do 20 tweets all tagged together. And people are sitting there saying, holy shit, and you say you're a writer, because it's usually reasonably poorly done. Yeah, I'm a writer. That's why I write that much. Twain said, a writer is someone who has great difficulty writing. I'm used to spending, and he also said, excuse the length of this letter. I didn't have time to write you a short one. It takes a long time to censor myself. And I'm so used to, if I really sit down and try to make a good sentence, it's going to say a lot and say it right with nuance and just, it's going to be a jam-packed sentence. But that's easy to read, too. That takes a while. And I'm used to that level of communication. Well, I don't have that kind of time. So if I'm on Twitter, I'll try to convey that same amount of information, but I ain't going to limit myself to a sentence because I don't have the time. So I'll say 10 sentences that, really I feel I could have conveyed in one, but I didn't bother trying. So it's been my experience, a lot of writers Not all. I've seen some writers who practice it even on Twitter, and they're just constantly tightening and shortening. And I think that's a great exercise. I think it's worth it. I don't do it. There was a time when I tried, and it worked actually. I did. My writing improved when I tried to do that. But nowadays, it's like I don't have the time. I'm out there on Twitter. I'll just say 20 tweets worth of stuff and done with it. But I think it's a bit of a. Here's the problem. Twitter does not lend itself to nuance. It is, as Mowdy likes to say, and I forget where he got this from, but a nuance killing machine. And because of that limitation, a lot of the people, in my experience, the people are on Twitter, the vast majority, for two reasons that I can tell. One, they just want attention, which is perfectly fine. We all want attention. I do this. I want attention. So I don't. You can say that of people who do YouTube channels too, quite frankly. But I think that's worth observing and noting. And some people want attention for legit stuff, and they're feeling sort of this absence in their life, and others want attention in negative ways. But that makes all of them. You have to keep them at arm's length, I think. Or they like the medium because it's so difficult for anyone to communicate effectively on Twitter that they know it's a great place to start a fight, because it's so easy to strawman someone. It's so easy to take something out of context. It's so easy because nuance just goes right out the window. So that's why the president should never have been policy on Twitter. Are you fucking shitting me? So you can get yourself into a lot of trouble on Twitter, especially with people who want to see you in trouble, who are applying worst charity. Twitter is a spectacular place for that because you don't have enough characters to really say something with nuance and significance. So it's all either surface or it's something that's going to be prone to attack. And, so Twitter ends up, in my view, being a lot of a waste of time because you end up having to defend yourself from people who oh God, there was a couple that I can think of. And they're just not even, they're not, most of it relating to the codex. There's a scientist on Twitter now, hangs out in some of the same circles, but he's an anti-theist. He thinks I'm a theist. He thinks I'm a theist. I'm an anti-theist. He thinks I'm religious. And it was because I posted a meme saying that the chances of this universe existing, this exact universe, in the way that we are now, and all of us here existing, are incalculably small. I agree with that statement. But if anything had changed, we'd have another universe where the odds would be just as incalculably small. So arguments from determinism, or arguments against, or arguments for God based on the fact that fine-tuning or anything like that don't impress me, because they'd work under any set of possible universes that would exist in. The fact that we're here, yeah, the chances are extraordinarily remote, but they would have been under any set of circumstances. So now I had that's obviously very hard to fit into a single meme. It was a one-page meme that I had tweeted. And he said, no, it's calculatable. He said it's 30%. Just 30%? Yes, it's 30% the chances that we would exist. Oh, no. Krauss calculated that there's a 30% chance that the universe could have spontaneously come up from nothing. Like, yes. It's like, that doesn't mean this universe. It goes, no, this universe. It's like, no. He's thinking like a physicist, I'm thinking like a philosopher. When I say this universe, I mean with every living human being right here. So, well, you couldn't have meant that because that's incalculable. Well, not exactly. No, so we ended up with an argument that lasted weeks. I had no interest in actually hearing what it was I had to say, but we were having it on Twitter, so it was really hard to And that stuff like that happens all the time. That's 90% of what's on Twitter. That's 90% of what's on Twitter. That and cat memes. So, I think toxic is, I think Twitter's a cesspool. I think it's toxic, and I haven't had very good luck with the people I met on Twitter. And I think, especially when I first started hanging out on Twitter, I assumed that they're all just people, and they're not. They're people who've been self-selected, again, for a reason, usually that they want attention of some kind. And by the way, me too. That's really what drew me to Twitter. So, but then the question is, so I'm not talking to just some Joe I see on the street. I'm not talking to a member of my family. I'm talking to a group of people who are all there for a very specific purpose. And what that means also is if they're trying to figure out how they can use me for that purpose. In the same way that, by the way, I'm thinking them. Because like I said, for me, it was like advertising for the Codex. I figured out memes that people would be interested in. Okay, but so at any rate, uh, Twitter's a cesspool, and I don't, Facebook, to the best of my understanding, is somewhat better, but I've never been able to get into Facebook. It's actually the Codex, and In Time on Facebook have had a lot more luck than we did on Twitter. But Twitter was just sort of where we started. So Twitter is, we'll share on Twitter, but not be a bad idea to switch over to Facebook. But nonetheless, I have seen people who use Twitter as an exercise in writing well, and I did that briefly for a couple of months, and I found it very useful. But it really is. It really is. It actually does force you to, if you're going to take it. And I was just like, oh, fuck this. I don't have the time. Let's see. Tedious and discussions like that make me think 0.999. Oh. Well, I mean, that's you can have that discussion on anywhere on the internet, though. Hold on. There we go. I had a hard time getting my mic back on. I I think a lot of people on Twitter are there looking for a fight. I think that's what they're there for. And Twitter is a great platform for doing that. That makes it a cesspool. Um, yeah, Twitter's finally. Yeah, I know. Twitter's one of the few. I've never been banned on Twitter. I've never been, and I mean, I'm reasonably prolific. How many tweets do I have? Jesus, I should figure this out. Hold on a second, because I have never, and I know people who have been banned, suspended, yada yada, like time and time and time again. I say controversial shit. I really do say controversial shit. But I've never been banned, never been suspended, never had a single. Let's see. So I have. That's how many followers. Last I checked, as I recall, I had. Oh, it's not telling me on the mobile. But last I checked, I had something like 25. Nope. Oh, there it is. 33,000 tweets. So okay, I've done 33,000 tweets. Haven't received a single warning of any kind. Which probably means I'm really dull and boring. Although the arguments I get into, I've had people try once or twice, especially if I start to lose my temper. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting the people who do and who don't yet, because yeah, it's a toxic environment. All right, well, so I don't know. We've covered a lot actually. This is one of our more sort of jam packed on writing. It's been sort of like going over. Let's see. We've covered. It started with criticism. How do you handle criticism, and why that's important, and why taking it personally is not a good idea. And but it's an art, so you're going to take it personally. It's like someone doesn't like your music, they don't like your songs, they don't like your paintings, whatever. It's the same thing. So we do what we love in it, and so we're going to take it very personally. But it's a very bad idea. And I have a few friends who don't like books in general. They don't like reading, and are thoroughly unimpressed with my skills in writing. And that in some cases that may also contribute to us being able to be friends, because there's no baggage on that end. But if a requisite for my being friends with someone was that they liked my work, that would limit my audience. Again, Hemingway only had 60% liked him at the height of his popularity. 40% thought he wrote like a child. So, if he says, okay, from now on, I'm only going to like people or spend time with people who like my work, he's going to have a problem. And that's of the literary community. Plenty of people still didn't really like literary works either. They like more commercial stuff. So, um, uh, yeah, video games. I was actually tempted. I was tempted. We may do this at some point. I'd still like to get a Minecraft server for in time. I was also tempted to stream. I've been playing Borderlands 3 a lot, and I'm enjoying it. And I played Borderlands 1 with my daughter a bit, and so now I'm suddenly gaming a little bit. And I was thinking of like putting that up on Twitch, but that's not really on brand for in time. I've had a few people actually ask, well, hey, if you stream you playing a game, I think you can get gaming content anywhere else. I don't think that's what it's still maybe worth a shot, but I don't know that I want to do that on any in time channel. I think that's just not what we do. But all right, well. So it's actually coming up around the hour mark. I'd love to stay if there are specific questions. I don't think there doesn't appear to be some troll mentioned I prefer MySpace, but yes, I'm old enough to remember when MySpace was a thing. Yeah, I've been enjoying Borderlands 3 a lot, and it's a little buggy. I've been having some. I lost one or two items that I bought, just vanished on me. Some of the controls, it switches guns every now and then, right in the middle of a battle. That's gotten me killed once or twice. But on the whole, it's still I think it's better than the previous two, and I'm enjoying it. But I'm gonna try not to spend too much time on it. But it's well, my daughter is also my youngest has taken to Star Trek, and she has she's made her character, and she always talks about it. Oh, I'm reporting for duty, sir. And she goes, we just start and we play, and she's having a blast. It's nice that I can do these things. I'm trying to remember also, I'm not going to have as much time as it feels like I'm going to have. My eldest just turned 12. 12. So, and she's already reaching the point where she's too cool to hang out with dad, even if he's playing the video games. So, I try to spend a little more time with him if I can. So. Oh well, thank you, Jeremiah C. I appreciate that. And like I said, we actually have a couple of episodes on writing, and like I said, I think if we're going to do it regularly, it needs to be on my channel. It's a little off brand for in time, but it's not so far off brand that it's like, you know what, a nice chillax evening. We're not going to cover COVID. We're not going to cover, and there's a lot going on. If you want to, you know what, come join us in the Discord. I'll drop in on our Discord about 5 minutes after the show's over. So. We can talk about writing, we can talk about COVID, we can talk about anything you want to, and all that stuff is going on our Discord. So, and we have the support from a lot of people. We have patrons, we have the super chat from Jake, and we have people who are supporting the show. So I really appreciate that. I think my hope is that they like the vast majority of the content, but this is like I said, it's a bit off brand, but I think you can. I enjoy it. And I figured, what, we could all use a break, and hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you enjoyed talking about writing. And I think we'll do a couple more, in the future. But it's not going to be. We were going to be doing this as part of, like, I think it was going to be every Thursday with our Thursday series. And I no, it's off brand. So as a nice thing, or if people really ask for it, we might do one intermittently. But we do have some new patrons, which has been spectacular, and I really appreciate you guys' support. And if anyone also has been doing any number of super chats and you're not a patron, as far as I'm concerned, you can come to the patron. It's the patron and supporter hangouts. So one of the things we do is I try to give people the supporter role on our Discord. And if you don't have that role, and you've super chatted several times at least. You can have the role. You can come to the patron hangouts, and because it's really for supporters, and anybody who wants to support the show, we have lots of stuff that and we have content that's just for supporters and for patrons. A lot of the behind the scenes stuff. Looking to add more of that content too. We just did a show that we were supposed to air, never did because we felt it was a little off color. It was good, but it was a little so That's our patrons and supporters get access to that. So if you join us on the YouTube, become a patron, anything like that, you're going to have access. But Regardless, you don't need to join anything to join us on the Patreon. So hopefully you'll join me there in about 5 or 10 minutes. And like I said, I think it was I'm really glad actually we did something a little off of the beaten path today. So thank you for joining us. And if I don't get another question in another minute or two, we seem to have gone off to math, which is spectacular. So come join us on the Discord. I'll be there in about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will. The Patreon hangout. So we have our first Monday of every month is the Patreon hangouts. So you come shoot the shit with us, talk about what you'd like to see, what you like in the direction of the show, what you don't like in the direction of the show, what you'd like to see us doing more of, less of, or just hang out and shoot the shit. So that's what this coming Patreon hangout will be about. And barring that, I look forward to seeing you all in just a few minutes. Thank you for joining us.